What's up, listeners? It's Andrea. Today, we question the safety standards of the Enterprise. Some Klingons try to stir shit up, and we ask the question, where did the phrase, throw 'em in the brig, come from? Stay with us to find out.
Welcome to the TNG Podcast, the #1 place in the Alpha Quadrant to geek out about all things Star Trek The Next Generation. I'm your co-host, Shereese.
Hey, I'm your co-host, Andrea. Shereese, today we're talking about Season 1, Episode 19, entitled Heart of Glory. This episode was written by Herbert Wright and D.C. Fontana and directed by Rob Bowman. The star date is 41503.7, which is super official sounding, and the original air date was March 21st, 1988. So, shoulder pads, eyeshadow.
Glorious fashion
So late
statements
80s.
of
Yes.
the 80s.
Yes. So let's jump right into the plot. The Enterprise enters the neutral zone to investigate the distress call of a Tellurian freighter. The freighter is badly damaged and 3 life forms are detected aboard. An away team beams over and finds 3 Klingons, Chorus, Conmel, and Kunivas, who are wounded. The away team returns them to the Enterprise before the freighter explodes, but just barely. Kunivas is taken to sickbay, and Chorus meets with Captain Picard. The Klingon explains that they were passengers when the freighter was attacked by a Ferengi ship. They managed to destroy the Ferengi ship, but sustained too much damage and thus were found adrift. As Chorus and Conmel are shown to their quarters, they're surprised to hear about a fellow Klingon, Lieutenant Worf, who is serving within Starfleet.
And there you have it, folks. That pretty much sums up this episode. So we hope you liked it.
Join us next week when we talk about
Okay, overall thoughts. So for me, when this episode started, I was like, wow, I don't remember this at all. But that's happened a lot in season 1 where I've been like, I don't remember this. Because as you guys may remember, I try to avoid season 1 like the plague. And I always start over in season 2. So a lot of times I go, man, I don't remember this episode. And then as I start to get into it, I'm like, oh, I totally remember this one. That didn't happen this time. I got all the way to the end of this episode and I was like, I have no recollection. This and Too Short a Season were both just like deleted from my memory files completely. So my overall thoughts though was I thought this was really good backstory into Worf, who so far has been a non-character.
Yes.
He's been set dressing for this entire season 1.
Totally.
And as some of you may recall, if you're just watching this series with us for the first time, we've mentioned before that the actress who plays Yar does end up leaving the show. And so I wondered if maybe this is setting up Worf's backstory so we can know, like, and trust him, because he will end up kind of replacing the role that Yar was playing. Like, this is my thinking. Maybe that's what was going on with the writers, why we have a whole Worf heavy episode, but I'm not sure.
That is a great thought. You know, I had a similar but slightly different take on this. I thought, man, this is giving a little bit of backstory on Worf, and we're starting to develop him as a character. I wonder if Denise Crosby, who plays Lieutenant Yar, was like, where's my backstory? You know, if they had given her some backstory and like an episode that kind of dug into who she is, maybe she wouldn't have wanted to leave, because we've talked about this a bunch of times, but she ends up leaving because she had said, like, I was basically just set dressing. Like, I didn't even have, like, really a role there.
You know, I've heard so many, we'll have to dig into this, people, when we get to that episode, which is coming up pretty shortly when Yar leaves, because I've heard her say in interviews that she left for different reasons. Like, I've heard her say, like, I didn't think the show was going anywhere. I've heard her say, like, I didn't want to be a Star Trek person. I didn't want that to be my legacy. Lots of different things. So maybe we'll dig into it and see if we can find the truth. I'm always interested when actors leave a show and you're like, was it on good terms? Was it on bad terms? And you just like, you can't really know because it's kind of like taboo to talk about. But as a fan, I'm always so curious. Like, this is the only time when I'm all about like Hollywood, like when I want to get into like the behind the scenes, like gossip. Yes. I'm just so curious. But anyway, so that was my overall thought, was like, maybe this was a swap-a-roo kind of an episode. What were your overall thoughts on this episode, if any?
I am not a huge fan of Klingons in general. I feel like they're just sort of all a little one note. It's just all about glory and battle and fighting. And there really isn't a ton of development, I think, in all of TNG. And those of you who disagree with me, please email us, info@the TNG Podcast, and let us know, because whenever I see a Klingon episode, I usually give it a pass. I just skip it because it's like, okay, they're all going to talk about glory and battle and the heart of a warrior. And it's just like, it becomes so tropey over time. But I didn't love this episode, but I also didn't hate it. I thought I would hate it, and I didn't, because I do like that it explains Worf's background for the first time in the series, including the story of the Romulan betrayal at Khitomer, which saw the death of his parents. And I did some digging for this episode, of course, and Michael Dorn, who plays Worf, was actually really pleased with this story for Worf, and he was really happy with the way that it came out. So if the actor who plays Worf is happy with it, then I can be happy with it too.
Yeah, I had to say that I did not love this episode by any stretch of the imagination. I thought it was really boring and slow, and I just really didn't care. However, that being said, I don't mind the Klingon episodes, and I really like getting a backstory on Worf. And I really think that his upbringing as a Klingon amongst humans is very similar to, being raised as, say, a Black child in a white family, which happens often with white families adopting Black children. It's usually not the other way around. You don't see that too often, Black families adopting white children, but you do see white families adopting specifically Black children. I remember having a friend who was like, my family, she was white, and she was saying, my parents are looking for Black children. Like, that's the exact type of child they want to adopt for some strange reason, which I don't understand, but they specifically wanted to have a brown child in their family. And I feel like that can feel really alienating and really isolating. I think it's coming from a really good place, of course. And I'm all about adoption and taking care of our children. At the same time, I feel like it can feel super isolating for that child, even though it may make the parents feel like, oh, look at me, I'm doing something great. But for the child, it's like, where do I fit? Where do I belong? I don't look like these people. I have to now be treated really differently from all of my siblings. And I feel like that's what was going on with Worf growing up with humans. And so I kind of liked that storyline is timeless. And he also has a sibling. We find out here he has a brother. We meet the brother in season 7. And in season 7, I could have his stepbrother. Yeah. We find out he has a few, we find out some things about him moving on, but here he mentions his stepbrother, and you don't see him until season 7. And in season 7, I could have sworn they just made up that stepbrother. Like, he did not exist before. And in this episode, I was like, oh, snap. They mentioned him. I didn't realize they had said that, and, his Earth parents and all that stuff. So, yeah, he's like Data, but a little bit worse off, because we talked about how Data didn't realize until he met Lore that he wasn't the only android in existence. So he was kind of grappling with, maybe I'm a one-off. Maybe no one has been created like me. Worf, on the other hand, has an entire planet that he is from, but hasn't been to since he was a little kid, can barely remember. But you see from like his regalia and how he carries himself and everything else, he has very much kept up the traditions of being a Klingon. So somehow his parents were able to, or he was on his own. We don't ever really get that piece, but somehow he was able to really hold on to what it means to be a Klingon, even though he was really displaced from that entire world completely. Right. And so, so it's kind of amazing and a testament to his character that he was able to not lose his cultural identity when completely enveloped in another culture for his entire formative years. Yeah. So agreed. Good on you, Worf. Good job, Worf. And I think that's why he's so serious as a character, right? Like, he was telling Riker in a future episode, he was like, Klingons don't laugh. And Riker was like, Klingons laugh all the time. You don't laugh. Like, Klingons laugh, hearty belly laughs. You don't laugh, because he kind of overcompensates, right? He has to be like so extra super serious as a Klingon so that people don't mistake him for a human. Yeah. I didn't think of that, but yeah, he does miss those formative years, like with his Klingon family, but yet still like carries the tradition and like the meaning of it for him, which is pretty cool. All right, so let's just jump right into this episode. I love that this episode starts right in the middle of the action. It's like suspenseful music, and, we're on the bridge, and they're getting reports from, just all around, and sensors are telling us this, and Worf is detecting this and that. It's super cool. I love those like cold opens that start off a little different. There's something really, for me, comforting and soothing about, you see the ship kind of coasting along and its captain's log starting, whatever, but this was like dun 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 dun, like right in it, which I love. So the Enterprise is receiving information about some action in the neutral zone, suspecting the Ferengi, possibly the Romulans, and it's the first time we hear Romulans in TNG. And I thought we were going to see the Romulans. I was like, oh my gosh, we're going to see them. And then they're like, no, we're not doing that. Okay, well, we can wait. Did you notice that Riker suggested doing the saucer separation, but Picard declined? He's like, let's wait until we have more information. And I was like, do it. Like, I want to see saucer separation. Do it. But then I was like,
Did you notice Counselor Troy is not in this episode at all?
Again, I did not notice that. Didn't even notice.
I read earlier that she was written out of 3 episodes. So this one, I think the next week's one, Arsenal of Freedom, and then there was one, was it Datalore that she was missing? There was one other, I can't quite remember, that she was missing. The thing that did catch my eye, and it's not that I noticed that she was missing, but I noticed that there was some like fancy camera angles going on. A lot of the bridge shot were shooting to the right side of Geordi at the con. So if you look straight beyond him, like Geordi is blocking Counselor Troy's empty seat. So it doesn't look like there's a glaringly empty.
Interesting.
One of the 3 seats is missing. Yeah. So they did a lot of like tricky little camera angles to cover for the fact that they were being dicks and wrote her out of this episode.
Yeah, when they could have just been like, she's like on sabbatical or whatever.
Or just be in the background and not say a lot. And honestly, I thought that this would have been a great episode for Counselor Troy to be on, where she's sensing Worf's struggle with his identity. Like this would have been great because Worf is an ice cold like wall. You can't get a read on him. So she totally should have been there, but whatever.
Fast forwarding a little bit, they're in the sick bay and one of the Klingons dies. And then the other Klingons kind of scream out, you know, because this is part of their like death ritual, is to when one of their warriors die, they kind of scream out. And the reaction that Picard and Riker have of like, oh my gosh, he was like some kind of animal. Like I was afraid, I wasn't sure. It struck a chord in me. Again, being African-American, sometimes I see this reaction from Caucasian Americans toward African Americans, specifically like large males. Right. Whenever they're already kind of there's just like this fear. Like, so I think I've spoken about this before, like my little brother, who I call my little brother, who's now, he's 25 years old tomorrow, and he's 6'3", and he's built like a linebacker. So he's actually a giant monster. But I still call him little brother.
I love it.
So my little brother walks into a room and people start clutching their purses because he's a giant black man. And so, he's like the biggest teddy bear. But because people are already afraid, if he does anything that can be misconstrued as threatening, like if he laughs really loud, oh, now he's raising his voice, now he's super scary, and then people lose their crap, you know? And so that's kind of how I felt in this scene where all the Klingons are like yelling, and then Riker and Picard are like, oh, what's going on? Oh, this is scary. Oh, he was like some kind of animal. I don't know. Can we trust him? Like, is he one of us? Is he going to be with the Klingon or whatever? I kind of felt that, like, it kind of struck that chord in me of this like really unnecessary fear that's just way over the top based on the situation. Yeah. It's like they're screaming because somebody just died. Like there's no reason to question Worf's integrity or loyalty or safety or
any
like
of that.
Character or any
of
that. Like this is a very have you ever seen him do this before? Like this is a very isolated moment. And instead of being like, this was scary, like we need to keep an eye on them, I feel like this was the moment to be like, what's going on here? To get curious and ask some questions. And I agree with you. Like this would have been perfect for Troy to be there because she could have interpreted when they were too afraid to ask or whatever. Yeah, she could have interpreted what was actually going on behind the curtains. So I agree. And it was a missed opportunity.
Yes. And I know that we're being asynchronous right now, but jumping way ahead, it was Data who had to kind of like look into the data banks to figure out that they scream or they howl or shriek or whatever you want to use to describe it in order to let the other warriors know that another warrior is on their way to like whatever heaven is or the afterlife or whatever, right? So why couldn't they just ask that question? Maybe they thought it was a sensitive subject.
Yeah, maybe.
But this is where Troy would have been helpful. Another place she would have been helpful is when they reach the Tellurian freighter and it's adrift and they're showing, you know, like life signs are failing and all this stuff. The ship detects that there are some life signs possibly aboard, but they can't be sure because there's so much interference because radiation is like leaking everywhere, all this stuff. Troy should have been there to be like, I can sense life. Like there are people there.
Yep. I sense fear, great fear. And I sense it from multiple life forms. Boom.
You're there.
Who needs sensors when you have Troy? Like, exactly. I totally agree. So
they do beam aboard and we get to see the way that Geordi sees, which I know is super cool. And I know that you're like really excited about it.
Oh my gosh. So cool.
The other thing I want to say too is how freaking amazing is that set of the ship? Like, oh God.
Amazing. This, people, is the antithesis of that stupid white screen behind the Ferengi.
Yes.
And whoever else in the first like 2-3 episodes.
1000%.
When it was just like a white screen and they're way too close to the camera. And you're just like, why couldn't you just build like a nice little set? This was the opposite of that. This was freaking amazing. And again, this is like a one-off set, right? They never have to use this set again, but it looked so cool, and the steam and the steel, and like you can see it's been through some stuff, and it was amazing.
Pipes and things like hanging down. They actually do use the set a bunch more times, like throughout TNG and Deep Space Nine, as it turns out. But yeah, they built this like elaborate set because it had to be big enough for them to walk around multiple paces and then kind of turn left and turn right. So this was like a big old set. It was, and then the steam curtain, like so cool. Was amazing. Kudos to props and set design because they fucking killed it with this. Yeah. Like this is one of the best. If you want to see a ship on the verge of absolute and total destruction, look at this episode. It's amazing. All right, so we can see how Geordi sees.
Which is so neat because we've been hearing all this time about how Geordi can see these special things, and he can see inside of electronics, and he can see infrared and all these different things. I did not like I said, I don't remember this episode ever existing, so I didn't know that we saw through his eyes. And it was just so cool to see like the different colors, and it was a little bit nauseating to see through his eyes. So
yes,
like,
a little bit.
Yeah, so probably better that we don't see too often through his eyes, but still it was neat. And I like how Picard was so fascinated by it, and like the clock is ticking and we're all gonna die, you know, and Riker's just like, Captain,
we don't have time for this. Yeah.
Because he's all like, look to the right. Oh, that's amazing. Look to the left. Yeah, that's cool. Okay, look back at Riker. Okay, now look at Data. Wow. Yes.
And I love that he goes, what's that? What's that? Captain, remember, we're here to look for survivors.
Yeah. Captain Domina rushes along.
Oh, yes.
Oh, right. Yes, of course.
I loved it. I loved it so much. Like the way that you can see the way he sees, I thought was super cool. The other thing, though, that I thought of was in 1988, this seemed super futuristic to like see through the eyes of somebody who's like out on a away team or whatever.
Right.
But these days you could just point your phone and walk along and people can see what you see on like FaceTime.
In real time. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, in real time, like on FaceTime, on Zoom, on Snapchat, whatever, right?
On anything, yeah.
Yeah, on anything. So I thought if we're in the 21st century and we have this technology, it seems so strange that like the comm badges don't automatically have like a little camera so you can see like what your away team sees. But in the 80s,
but you can only see it at chest height, so that can get awkward. I don't know. Maybe
when you talk really close to Counselor Troy.
I feel like everybody would talk really close to Counselor Troy.
However, she's not in this episode, so we don't have to worry about that. So whatever. But they find Data does his super strength.
Yeah.
And like rips this heavy metal door open, which is super cool.
Yeah.
And they find Klingons, which was totally unexpected. They find Klingons
on this Talarian freighter or whatever.
Yes. So they find 3 Klingons, and Geordi is saying the ship is about to break apart. We're having like a structural breach. Shit's about to hit the fan. I don't know why they didn't just transport them straight out of that room, but they had to like travel a ways. Maybe there was radiation or something.
So this is another piece of technology that they bring up from time to time. When things are all crazy and the ship's about to crash and there's like electrical storms or whatever, they can never get a lock on the away team. So they need pattern enhancers. And sometimes these are physical separate units that kind of look like tripods. They set them up in a big triangle. They stand between the triangle. It enhances their pattern so that they don't get lost in the buffer, which is like the same as being killed. So they try to like keep people from not dying. So in the case of a ship that's all breaking apart, the closest pattern enhancers are their transport rooms. So they try to get them to like a room that has like transporter pads on the ground, because those are like enhancing their pattern. Or if not, they try to get them in a place that's not surrounded by other things that are sparking and exploding and everything else that could also interfere with them trying to get a lock. So if you notice, they went to like a slightly less messy location, you know, just like a place that has like a little bit more space. But that's a little piece that I've noticed that they do as which is, I don't know, it's kind of fun because it adds to like, will they get there on time? It adds to the drama.
That is
but a lot of times they do make them try to move to a location where they can better get a lock. And then they have the whole, like, they're getting transported out. Oh, they're still there. And you're like, no, come on.
Yes, that was really, really cool, because Tasha tried to beam them out and their pattern sort of went woo, 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 you know, on the transporter pad on the Enterprise. And then they reappeared back on the freighter, and you can see the crew kind of looking around like, how did we end up back here? And Tasha goes, I need you to move to a different location. And the ship is literally blowing up. And Picard's like, there's no time, go. And so I love when we see this, and it is used a little more than maybe I would like, but a ship explodes And then the next shot is looking at the transporter pad with no one on there. And then like 5 seconds later, they appear.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, so what's our cutoff really? It's like the ship explodes. You look at the transporter pad and like 15 minutes later, they appear. Like, there's gotta be.
Well, wait a minute. We have an episode. Where there is a Starfleet officer who has been in the transporter buffers for like 70 years.
Yeah, but he did that to himself. Like he put himself in it going, I can hold my pattern.
Yeah.
Well, I guess that's true. So 70 years
Well, I'm just saying, right?
cutoff.
So we're saying like, yeah, so 70 years is the cutoff. At that point,
maybe 71
you're no longer,
is.
Yeah, 71. We'll give him an extra year. So at 71 years, you're no longer, your pattern's not in there anymore. So
yeah,
sorry about that.
Maybe. Yeah. So anyway, they managed to get them off in the nick of time. They take the sick Klingon to sickbay, and they have a couple of questions. What were you guys doing there?
That was not a Klingon ship. Where's the
crew?
Not a Klingon
ship.
Why were you adrift?
Yeah, there's a lot of like good questions. Now, when Picard goes to sickbay to ask them questions, he brings Worf with him. And when they see Worf, they're like, what's this? A Klingon in Starfleet? Like, what is this? So there's immediately this bonding between the two Klingons and Worf.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So one of the Klingons ends up not making it. And that's when they let out that roar to like warn the dead that a Klingon war is about to arrive.
Mm-hmm.
And we already talked about that, so I'm going to just breeze right past it. So now this Klingon's dead, and they do have an interesting sort of ritual where they're like, Beverly says, what would you like me to do with the body? And they say, it's just an empty shell, so dispose of it as you wish. And that actually, for me, that's very much how I feel about death. It's like, you're already dead, it's an empty body. Like, my husband and I had to do the whole, like, the living trust and your final wishes kinds of thing, you know, like legally. And I was like, I don't really care what you do with my body once I'm dead. Like,
yeah,
you know, it doesn't matter because at that point I'm gone. So whatever. Yeah. So I thought that was interesting.
I like that too. And then they said it again in the episode. And I really, I appreciated that because it actually is very in line with how much with the Klingon way of like having a glorious death, right? If you're going to die in battle, die fighting, which I'm all about. Like, yeah, like not that I want to die in a big fight or anything. However, whenever I see those movies, when people are like cowering in a corner and like the bad guy's coming after them and they're like, no, please, no. Yeah. And they die. I'm always like, son of a gun. Like if they're going to kill you anyways, go out swinging. So I really appreciate that the Klingons are like, if I'm going to die, I'm not going to die cuddled up in a corner sucking my thumb. Like I'm going to die swinging. And then once you're dead though, like it's finished. Like it's totally over your body. It's just an empty shell. So the Klingons are just like, whatever, it's an empty shell. Like shoot it out in space if you want to. We don't care. Yeah. And so here's something funny. You mentioned this before, Andrea, and it just came up again. They're standing over this man who's like dying and they're just like, so what were you guys doing on the ship? And they're just sitting, like chit-chatting. And I was like, you know what? Andrea's right. There's clearly no HIPAA in the 24th century. Like nobody's like, privacy, like, hello.
Well, yes. However, I do think when you sign up for the military, you basically sign your rights away.
Yeah, that's fair.
And that's basically, fair. Starfleet is the military. So you sign your rights away and you don't have any rights anymore. So
that actually totally makes sense.
It tracks, right? It tracks.
Yeah.
But okay, so Worf, now this guy's dead. They've all done the scream.
Oh, and they snag something off his shoe.
Yes, they take something off his shoe. And that one, like, background Klingon annoys the crap out of me. He's always got, like, a smirk on his face. And like, his acting is terrible. I really don't like anything to do with this.
What bothers me about these Klingons is the fact that they are white men in blackface. And that just bothers the crap out of me. They do this for almost all the Klingons. Michael Dorn is actually an African-American man in this costume that's like brown. Yes. But like the Ferengi were all white people. The Klingons are almost always played by white men, which you wouldn't know except for the fact that their eyes are like blue. Their eyes are like blue or like green or whatever. And you're like, oh, maybe you should find somebody with brown eyes. So then it would be like it would break the fictive bubble a little bit less. It would make it a little more believable. So that always bothers me. But then I have to just be like, you know what? It's TV. Apparently in the 80s, white men were the only actors available. We talked about this on previous shows. They were the only people available to act. So that's just what we had to work with. Yeah. And I will say the background Klingons, like he just wasn't a great actor. I don't know.
No, I mean, I felt like he was really annoying me. Because the main Klingon who's doing all the talking, he has these like teeny little pauses in his speech.
Yeah.
And right when he does the backup Klingon, the backup dancer will say his one line. So it's like, in his mind, he's just waiting to be like, this is my line. Okay, now I'm going to talk for a while. Okay, this one is my line too. And like the pauses are just so choreographed that it feels really unnatural. It feels very unnatural.
I mean, acting must be hard. So I'll give it to you guys.
I'm sure.
It's seeing these people who do it so amazingly well, who are so fluid, is what makes the contrast so apparent.
Yes. When you see Patrick Stewart acting, it just feels like Captain Picard. And then you see this other guy, and you're like, nope.
You're like, is that Dave? Is that you?
Hey, Dave stopped by, everybody. Yeah, that's totally what it feels like. So, all right, but we digress. So
we don't have much to talk about in this episode anyways. That's going to be the meat of it anyways.
That's true. There's really not a lot of meat on this bone. So, but Worf forces Chorus to reveal the truth because he's like, you guys, something is fishy here. This is where we needed that asshole from last week. No. This is where we needed that Rimmick to be like, tell me the truth or you're going to jail or something, right? We needed him to be poking and prodding. But whatever. So we don't have him because thank God he's gone.
Yeah.
But Worf forces him to reveal the truth. So those three Klingons had commandeered a freighter in order to seek out a place where they can live as quote unquote true Klingons, meaning lighting up the galaxy with battles, I guess. I don't know. Like
I think they were looking for a planet where they could just like live off the land. Well, see, I don't know if they wanted to go to war with any other species or like aliens. It sounded more like they just wanted to kind of like almost like the people who want to go and live in the forest or whatever.
Yeah, be like
go and live in the mountains.
Hunters.
Yeah, like that's what they want to do. They just want to live off the grid and just live the way they want to live. They didn't want to be forced to be in peace treaties and forced to basically be Worf. They did not want to be Worf. They didn't want to have to be peaceful and have to be diplomatic and they just wanted to like hunt and eat what they kill and die not in peace, but die kind of in battle. And they felt like they couldn't die in battle.
Differently. I took it as them wanting to break the alliance with the Federation and just blasters at the ready, just go to battle.
They were looking for an uninhabited planet in the neutral zone. They were trying to get out of the Federation and out of the reach of the Klingons because they didn't want to be a part of this new Klingon Federation alliance system. They wanted to go back to their old ways, so they couldn't stay. So they were trying to actually like leave the Federation territory altogether.
Yeah. Okay. I could.
Yeah, which was like a losing battle. Like that was not going to work for them.
It was last week. Jake taking the shuttlecraft and trying to like go join the circus, and you're like, no, it's not. That's why it's a child's dream because it doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
Anyway, so they totally just admitted to destroying. They had a battle with a Klingon ship who had come to take them because they're fugitives, and they destroyed the Klingon ship. So they just admitted to like killing
who knows
hundreds of their own, on this Klingon ship. And then they immediately ask Worf for a tour of the ship. And he's like, sure.
Let's do it.
Come on. Yeah, it's like, wait. I'm sorry.
I also thought that was a bit weird. Now, I did not think they were going to do anything like, well, actually, no. They did seem a little shady, and it did seem like they were going to do something like try to take over the Enterprise. And I felt like Worf should have maybe been a little more keen on that. That being said, though, I did feel like there was like a scene missing where they were like, where he was like, you killed them? And he was like, well, yeah, it was battle. We were fighting for our lives. They lost. They died. Our ship, we almost died too. And we would have died if you hadn't come along. So that's what happened. It's kind of like, all right, you guys had a battle. That's what happened. And then it was like, let's go on a tour. Okay. I was like, wait a minute. We needed something in the middle, some little bridge to be like, all right, but you guys are going to do that here, right? Or like, what's your next step? Or I don't know. Some kind of, there was like no end to that conversation. It just kind of abruptly switched to let's go on a tour. Let me show you the most heightened security places of our ship.
Yes, I agree with you 1000%. There had to be, if I just admitted to being in a battle and killing a bunch of people and then being like, can you guys give me a tour of like the kitchens and stuff? That would be so out of the ordinary, like expected behavior. It just doesn't make any sense. So they asked for a tour of the ship, which I thought was actually, there was one or two moments here that for me stood out. Here's a moment that didn't stand out, but worth noting. Those chairs were back in the engineering table. I was like, God damn it, they do use those chairs. They do use them.
We're gonna find out those chairs are there till like season 5.
I bet. Yeah, because in 11001001, I was like, why are there chairs there? They never have chairs. And there are chairs and women in scants sitting in the chair. So I was like, oh, this is like double jeopardy right here. We've got chairs and scants for 500, please. I was like, oh, it's all there. But so that's a throwaway. But 2 Klingons enter main engineering, and they marvel at the battles that they could have at the helm of the Enterprise, that's what makes me feel like they're out just going to be like warring Klingons, because they're like, think of all the battles we could have here. And Worf posits that their ideologies may not fit the modern time, that thirst for battle is sort of a relic of the past. And this to me was so telling. They respond with, you'd never know it standing here. And I went, oh my God, this is Republicans. They're Republicans. Like, they just, like,
what do you mean?
They hanker for like a simpler time where things made more sense to them. And others are like, the like racist and like oppressive ideology that raised you up as like Caucasians doesn't fit the modern time, because now we're much more aware of like that oppression and how people are fighting back. And you could tell that to like dyed-in-the-wool Republicans, and they're like, well, you'd never know by standing on my plantation that like anybody had a hard time. It's like, but what about me? It was a lot of what about meism. It was like, well, my ideologies may not fit the time, but it's still what I want. I want to return to like the let's make America great again bullshit. That's like, no. Things were great for you and terrible
I see what you're saying.
for millions of other people and like cultures and races, but things were good for you. So that's how I felt. Like, to me, I was like, oh my God, this is like the GOP right here.
Interesting. I'm not sure if I would say that's all Republicans, but I could definitely think of a current administration and that individual's followers that totally makes sense when you're like laying it out that way of like this. I want to return back to the good old days, but when the good old days were only good for a select few. And not everybody else. And so maybe those days weren't so good. Yeah, that's a good point. And I feel like in this instance, when we're talking about the Klingons and their dreams, is that does make sense. They are wanting a time when it's just like battle after battle, and they don't like this time of peace with the Federation, because the Federation and the Klingons had this like 100-year war that was resolved in the original series. And now like there's peace. And so it was either the original series or the movies after the original series, but it was resolved. And so they're longing for the time when it was constant war and constant battle. But like, how many people were dying? Like, so many people were dying. It wasn't just glorious. And it kind of also reminds me of like war movies. You know how some war movies really glamorize like war and death and killing and stuff. And I'm all about, don't get me wrong, I'm all about like some Captain America type stuff where it's just like totally fake, and it's totally fake, and so that it's really entertaining. But when you see a movie like Glory, and it's not fake and entertaining, or like Saving Private Ryan, it's not fake and entertaining, but it's like gritty and real. It's just horrible. And you're like, who would ever glamorize this? Who would ever want this? Who would ever want to entertain? Like, this is not entertainment. This is heart-wrenching horror.
I think the people who glamorize war and battle have clearly
never been in war or battle. There's like nothing about that that's beautiful or heroic. It's just awful. It's like awful.
So a Klingon ship arrives and demands the return of the 2 surviving renegade Klingons. And I had a moment where I was watching the scene, and the Klingon aboard his ship, he did have like the Klingon writing behind it, which is really cool. Did you notice how much effing smoke there was, though? I was like, is this a Vegas casino in the 1950s? It was just smoke everywhere. Like, the dude was seated in the smoking section of his
I wasn't
bridge.
sure what that was about, if that was trying to be mysterious and cool or something, because it looked really cool on the ship that was like derelict. Like, because it was about to explode. On the Klingon ship, maybe it was supposed to be like an atmosphere of mystery. I don't know. But the ship was cool, though.
Could you imagine, though, if the Enterprise had that much smoke on its... it'd be like, do the air purification systems not work here? Where's the smoke detector? Like, none of this works. Why is there so much smoke?
We don't have any sprinklers on the Enterprise.
So if that would be a problem. Smoking, the ship is done. That's it.
Yep.
Maybe Dr. Leah Brahms should have put some smoke detectors and some sprinklers up in here. Come on, Dr. Brahms. Anyway, so they find out, right? The bridge finds out that like these 2 Klingons are renegades. And so Picard sends Yar and a security team to go get the 2 Klingons. And then there's that moment where like it looks like it might be a hostage situation with the little girl. But then,
and you see Yar's face is just like, oh crap. It's going down, and her whole entire what they sent like a battalion of like 7 people or something for these 2 Klingons, and they're all like, I mean, usually they just send like Wesley, but here they've got a whole army. These 2 Klingons.
He's not in this episode.
He's not him. He's
Him
with
and Troy were on Ryza, just chilling.
Oh my gosh,
Sipping
Ryza.
a Ryzen pina colada or whatever.
Or whatever the heck
Wesley's
they
was
drink.
virgin, of course.
Of course.
But yeah.
And so, yeah, Troy's was synthahol. So they have this scene where you're like, oh crap, it's going to be, it might be a hostage situation. And this, little girl's like running into danger and you've got the mom like, oh honey, no, come back.
Yeah.
You're just like, oh, this is so stupid. But what I love about this is after they give the girl back and, they go to the brig like peacefully, of how Yar's just like, oh man, like I thought that was going to be a bad situation. And Worf just looks at her. It's just like, why? And he goes, only cowards take hostages. Klingons do not. I was just like, boom, right?
Yeah,
like
that was
we don't do hostages. That's something that a coward would do.
That was a cultural tidbit that was dropped. That was actually really because it was really useful.
Because everybody takes hostages.
Yes. Like everybody every culture takes hostages. But I love that it gave that like we are warring people.
Right.
We have rules.
Ethics.
Yes, we have ethics about our warring. I love that you mentioned the brig. So they send them to the brig. Did you notice the brig was different? It was just like a room.
Yeah.
It's like a little force field. It wasn't that normal, like the normal, like super cool brig.
Right, where it's got like 3 rooms with force fields.
It's like a cargo bay with like separate cells. It was really cool. And then I did a little digging because that's what I do. I was like, why is a brig called a brig? So I've always known that it's like a military prison, like on a ship.
Yeah.
Right. So pirates are always like, throw them in the brig.
Yeah.
So here's a little deep dive that I took on the brig. A brig is a United States military prison aboard like a Navy or Coast Guard vessel. Or like at an American like naval or like Marine Corps base. I don't think the Army uses brig. They may, but I didn't find it in my deep dive. So, but the term itself derives from the word brigantine, which is a twin-masted Navy ship. And those Navy ships, the brigantines were used as prison vessels to transport prisoners. And so they shortened it and called it they were called brigs. Like it was just a whole ship. The whole ship was like a series of jail cells to transport prisoners. And so now it's called the brig. So I love that the Enterprise, because it's a military vessel, has the military term.
Well, yeah, and I love that. I had no idea. And the Starfleet vessels are all starships. Like all their stuff is Navy terminology. None of it's like it's not like Air Force, even though it's technically kind of sort of in the air. Like it's not that. It's all Navy terminology.
Yes. So I thought that was really cool. I was like, why are brigs called brigs? It's like from the ship, the brigantine ships, which is super cool. So deep dive of the day. There you go. I'm gonna have to make that like a sound bite.
so they're sitting in the brig and they start all of a sudden pulling off all of these things from their outfits and snapping them all together. And this was like, I feel like these Klingons were a total mix between 007 and MacGyver.
Yes.
And I was like, this is the coolest effing thing I've ever seen. They're building something. At this point, we don't know what it is totally, but they're building something from their outfits. Right. So it wasn't like, because you know how like 007, it's like his wristwatch or like his glasses, or it'll be something that seems like benign. With the Klingons, they already have like super cool uniforms. Like they just have cool stuff and like shiny things and stuff hanging all over the place. So you don't really think twice about it. And they're just like clip, handing things over and like clipping things into place. I was like, what? That was awesome.
This was super cool. And I actually wrote in my notes, the Klingons, MacGyver, a disruptor together. And it made me wonder, do all Klingon uniforms have these pieces that could be like put together? I have never seen
this in any future episode.
So effing cool.
So cool.
I mean, the disruptor itself looked, as a person who looks at props, it looked a little wobbly. Like I felt like you couldn't handle it too much because it like the tube would break off.
Which makes sense. It was made of pieces broken off from a shoe, right? Like,
it does make sense. It couldn't be like a Romulan disruptor that's all sturdy and stuff.
Exactly.
But it did look super cool. So they raced him in engineering, and one of them dies. The backup dancer dies.
Right.
That's what I've decided to call him. And the surviving one runs to main engineering, and he points his phaser at the warp core, threatening to destroy the entire ship. And he wants Picard to give him the star drive section, which
it's not going to happen.
Did you think that was ever going to work?
It's not going to happen.
You would have
had a better chance being like Jack from our last episode, trying to snatch a shuttlecraft, which is I think what they wanted to do originally. I think the two of them were going to go and try to steal a shuttlecraft, but then they got pinned down by security and like they had to change the plans. but that would have been a much better move still. I mean, they would have just tractor beamed you back or whatever, but you had a much better chance of escaping in a shuttle.
You're trying to take the star drive, like that whole...
And as one person are trying to control this entire ship with no crew. Like, get out of here, man.
Which also, you know, that also leads me to believe that they were looking for battles, because Worf had said when the Enterprise is removed of its bulk, it becomes a formidable weapon. And I was like, okay. And honestly, if he had somehow managed to get a hold of the battle bridge and do the saucer separation, Picard and company wouldn't have been able to do anything, because the saucer section
has no engine.
It's not really equipped. Yeah, it's not really equipped to take on the star drive. Sure. Anyway, but Worf comes up to the second floor of main engineering, where the Klingon is pointing the disruptor at the warp core. And they kind of have this talk about like glory and what that means and all that stuff. And it's kind of throwaway for me. But the thing to note, there was this really cool overhead shot. I don't know if you noticed, of like the Klingons or the Klingon and Worf, and the warp core is kind of going like downwards. So the director, Rob Bowman, came up with this overhead shot, and it had never been seen before. And I don't think it's ever seen again, like that particular angle. But I was like, oh, that's really neat. Like, it's visually pretty stunning. So
yeah, the warp core in general is just beautiful, right? It's just that I know
it's my favorite one.
I guess it's just like a tube of lights or whatever. I don't know, but I would love to see that in person. Like, it just looks so pretty. I would love to see that.
I love the hum of it, that like thrumming. It's like so soothing. It is my favorite of the warp cores. That's possibly the dorkiest thing I've ever said in my life. The TNG warp core is my favorite. The Voyager has like a swirly one. It looks pretty cool, but I love the like thrumming lights and how they come together. It's super cool. Anyway, so they have this hostage, or they have this kind of crisis.
Yeah, and this is really like a death by suicide moment, because this Klingon knows he's not getting away. He knows no one's giving him the ship. He's not going to blow it up. He will blow it up if he has to, but he's hoping. Like, when Worf comes up, it's such a relief. I think this is reading a lot of subtext, but I think it's such a relief because he's like kind of daring Worf to kill him, because he wants to die in glory, and in battle, he does not want to be a prisoner. Like, they don't want to go back to be prisoners. And Worf had that conversation with the captain of the Klingon ship, saying like, hey, like, they just want to live in peace, like, or not in peace. They want to live in war, right? But they just want to kind of go off and do their own thing. If you put them into captivity, that's worse than death. And he was like, I don't want to put them into captivity. I know it's worse than death, but that's what they have to do. This is the consequence of their actions, and that sucks for them. And so it's like, I feel like this other Klingon's kind of like wanting Worf to kill him so he could die in battle and die in glory, or he's going to blow up the warp core and still die in glory. He is not going to be a prisoner locked up in some Klingon brig forever and ever. Like, that's definitely not happening.
Yeah, that is not the Klingon way. So Worf ends up shooting him and killing him, and he falls through the glass, and then he dies. And Worf does the scream again, but now at least they know what it is, so nobody is like horribly alarmed.
Yeah, so no one's running and looking up the database to find out what's going on. And at this moment when he crashed through the floor, I just put like, I think that was the first time or only time that I recall somebody crashing through the floor. Like, that floor is always glass, but that's the only time that I've seen someone crash through that glass in my recollection of Star Trek universe. And I thought, that floor is not quite sturdy enough, because I feel like if somebody trips,
he literally
and then
just
face plants, that they could just crash and find themselves at the bottom of the warp core.
Also, why is that not safety glass? It should have shattered into a million little pebbles that are like more safe. No.
I feel like it shouldn't have shattered at all. I feel like he should have just fallen over, and it should have been sturdy enough to walk on, and not fall through.
Plexiglass or something. I mean, visually, I get it. Like, there's this big crashing moment, and it's visually like cool, but
I don't know if he needed to crash through the ceiling in order.
He didn't need to do any of that. He
I don't know.
Been shot and died.
He could have just been shot and died, and Worf could have just been up there and done the death cry from up there. I don't feel like he needed to crash to the ground. I was just kind of like,
he didn't need that at all. But anyway, so Worf then goes and explains to the captain of the Klingon ship, like, he died well, and the Klingon offers him a post, and Worf says, "I'm honored, thank you." And then this view screen turns off, and he kind of walks back to his post and has that moment where he's like, I was just being polite, guys. Like,
because Riker and Picard are staring at him, right, as he's walking there, watching his every move. Like, so wait, are you gonna take that, or sounded like you were gonna take that?
Are you leaving? Yeah,
I was just being polite. Oh, okay, yeah. Okay. No, we knew that. We knew that.
Engage. Yeah, that was basically it.
So backing up a little bit. So the guy crashes through and he's on the ground and everyone's just kind of staring, and then he dies, and then Worf does the scream. And while I was looking at that scene, I was like, Worf just shot somebody. Nobody wants to call Crusher in. No one wants to be like, sick bay, medical emergency. This dude just got shot by a phaser. Nope, we're just going to sit here and wait till he takes his last breath. And then let Worf scream. I was like, and like, that's how he wanted to die, right? But like, I felt like everybody else kind of had a duty to inform sickbay.
I bet that Klingon is still lying there in main engineering, covered in glass, and they're just going about their business. Yeah, nobody thought twice about it.
But whatever, I get it for the episode.
They're just stepping over him in the glass in their scants, going about their business and engineering.
Oh my gosh! In my notes, I wrote so many scants. This was like the scant episode.
It was like the last hurrah of the scants. Are like, well, we're probably going to get rid of all this for season 2, so let's just
freaking
use
hope
the
so.
shit out of it. I think that you do see scants in like background players in season 2 and 3. Like you might see, like you're on a starbase and see somebody like way in the distance, like walking across the hallway. Like you might see that, because think about it, the costume department was like, well, we're not going to make all new costumes for everybody.
And we've got 75 scants back here.
Yeah, so we might just throw it on somebody and have them walk like through a garden like half a mile away. Who cares? So whatever. Anyway, so that's kind of where the episode leaves it, and I'm happy to let it live. I'm happy to let it lie there, just like the dude in engineering who's still like happy to let it lie.
We're just gonna let this episode lie forever. Once we get off this call, we're gonna do a little scream and let this episode go.
To let the other past episodes know that this one's coming. And we're going to call it a day. So stick with us next week when we talk about season 1, episode 20, The Arsenal of Freedom. Thanks for hanging with us. And thank you, Shereese, for geeking out with me.
Of course. Yeah. And guys, next week's episode, I'm so excited about because I really, really like the Arsenal of Freedom episode. So I really look forward to that conversation. And we will see you guys next week. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for geeking out with us. Be sure to join the crew at thetngpodcast.com to be the first to know when we do our live shows or host events exclusively for our members. We'll see you next time.